Welcome to Sweethearts or Rivals. I'm Charla.
I'm Justin.
What are we doing today?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Ooh. Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game.
Yep.
That you can play with a variable number of players.
Yes.
And it's going to take you as long as it takes you.
As long as you want to keep playing.
Right.
It's a game that never ends. And the reason that I have this is because I have been playing the new edition of D&D so much that my book fell apart. And I had to cut the binding off and punch it so I could put it into a binder so that I could continue using my book. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what Dungeons and Dragons is, what a role-playing game is. Then we're going to have another video where we make a character for you, and then another one where I send your brand new first level beginning adventure on an adventure by herself.
That sounds a little scary to me.
Yeah. Total party kill.
It's only going to take one.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be awesome. And then at the end of that adventure, should you survive, you'll level your character up to level 2 so we can show what that's like. And then maybe we'll do a review. And then if people are like, that was amazing, I might take your awesome new character on other adventures.
We'll have to see how the response is.
That's right. Excellent. So first of all, there's no board. There's no screen. It's not a video game. Everything that takes place in a tabletop RPG is in your head.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you can't use props. Some people use maps that they put out on the board. Some people use miniatures and little combat, kind of like a board game. So you can do that if you want. But it doesn't have to be. It can all just be all up in your head.
Right.
Yeah. And, of course, RPG stands for role-playing games. So playing an RPG, you are going to play the role of a specific character. So there are elements of the game with rules and stats and rolling dice to see if you're successful or not. But then there's also a side of it where you have a character with certain personality traits and an alignment and motivations and goals. So the different characters aren't going to approach problems in the same way. And sometimes a lot of the problems that come up are just because of the characters, when you have a party of more than one person, interacting and conflicting with each other, which is awesome. The interesting thing with an RPG is there's one person that is the game master, or in Dungeons and Dragons, it's the DM or dungeon master, and they're kind of like a narrator in a novel. They're narrating what the story is to the players. Then they get to a point where they're like, okay, what do you do? So they've kind of spelled out the situation, and the narrator or the DM has absolutely no control over what the characters do. The players do. So I would spin a scenario of the starting of the story and then say, what does your character do? And then she'd say, well, my character's going to try to do this. And how successful her character is at what she's trying to do depends on a lot of different stats. And that's where all the rules come in and rolling dice to see if you're successful or not. And the story just kind of evolves from that. It's a very collaborative process, which is why it's so fun. Dungeons and Dragons is specifically what we call a hack and slash RPG, which means it is a whole lot of combat and killing monsters.
But you can throw in some intrigue too.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to be all about the killing monsters.
No. It's not all about it, but that tends to be a lot of the focus. Whereas there are other RPGs where one character can be totally combat and one person can have just as much power and have nothing to do with combat. And then there's other RPGs that are just all intrigue and very little combat. So D&D, which is one of the most popular, if not the most popular RPG, is primarily combat. If you're not good at combat,
you might be a little bored.
You're going to struggle a little bit, yeah. So that's RPGs, that's Dungeons and Dragons. The only other thing that's very interesting about D&D, especially in this newest 5th edition, is that there is an organized play that is happening. And there are adventures, these little tiny quick easy modules that come out Stores can actually get in touch with distributors and host events and get special perks for doing that. And then there's a whole system of, if you are a DM in organized play, whenever you run a game, you actually get DM rewards that you can put on characters and all sorts of crazy awesome stuff. There's a trophy system if you love trophies, all sorts of crazy awesomeness. So if you're interested in playing and you can't find a group, I would definitely talk to local board game places and see if there is an organized Adventures League game, because then you can create a character and then everyone's welcome, which is awesome.
So you can have a variety of books for D&D, and the first one you're going to want to get is the Player's Handbook.
Yep.
And it looks like this.
Yeah.
Most of the time, though, it will come in a binding.
Yep.
But this one here, if you open it up, the first part of the book is an introduction, of course, and then it's going to tell you how to make a character.
Yep.
And then you go on, and it's going to tell you what kind of races you can have. So you can have, like, dwarves and halflings and humans and a variety of races. Gnomes. And then the book is going to go into what kind of classes you can have. So then you're going to be able to choose those. And it's like, these are the bards and fighters, clerics, wizards, and whatnot.
Yep.
And then it's going to go into what kind of background you had before you were an adventurer.
And that's actually something new to 5th edition. They didn't have that in any of the previous editions.
So they're going to give you things like skill proficiencies. It's going to tell you what kind of languages you can have and what kind of equipment you have. And then these are the personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. So you get to choose one of these, and that's what you get to role play your character based off of.
Yeah.
So not only the race and the class, but also these kind of quirky things as well.
Yeah. And again, this is something that's, I mean, I could always create like, oh, I'm going to have an elf sorcerer, and maybe they hate goblins a lot. Like, they just want all goblins to die. I could come up with that on my own, but now you kind of have a list of ideas specific to your background on how that has created the personality of your character. And you're not really like, you don't have to choose a specific personality from that background. You can, it's kind of free and open for that. These are just ideas.
Right.
And it makes for very interesting role-played characters.
But it's really handy, though, when you're first starting out, that it gives you this kind of guideline that you can go by.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of different backgrounds. And then it's going to come into equipment. So it's going to tell you, like, what kind of damage your weapons are going to do, and how well your armor is going to protect you, and how much it's going to cost to get those things.
And a lot of adventuring equipment.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's going to dictate what kind of things your character can sometimes do on the adventures.
Yeah.
So then your next section is like the customization options.
It's going to be really important, like when you start leveling up and getting like more and more powerful, you can start customizing your character to more what you want them to do.
And then you're going to have the section on your combat, and then the section on how to use your magic.
Yeah. And a great big list of spells.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, the last third of the book is just all your character spells.
Yeah. And you can actually buy decks of cards. So if you have a cleric, you can buy the cleric deck, and it has each spell on its card. So you could just have kind of like a little mini deck of all the spells your character knows with all their stats, which is nice. I just take a piece of loose leaf and I just write them down real quick. Yeah. And as you get used to them, you don't have to use any of them because you just remember. Like, I know Firebolt is a cantrip that has a 120-foot range. It requires a spell attack and it does 1d10 fire damage.
Okay.
Because I use it a lot. Firebolt is awesome.
What are some of the other books that you would get?
Other books. The Player's Handbook is for pretty much everybody because everybody wants to go in and start playing, and that's got all the basics. Once you are going to go past being just a player and you want to start running games, then the next thing you want to get is the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is the guide for if you want to be a Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master's Guide has a lot of sections on creating your own worlds, creating multiverses, adventures, non-player characters that are compelling and interesting, because yeah, I could throw a couple of goblins at you and yay, that's fun, but what if I have a big villain that's behind all these little tiny adventures that's much more interesting? Chapters on the environment, chapters on what's going to happen to characters in between adventures. There's a whole huge section on treasure and
treasure.
magic items.
Rare items?
Rare items, unique items, magic items. Sometimes they are artifacts. Sometimes they are alive. Sometimes they're items that when you get them, you're cursed forever and you want to make a new character. All sorts of good stuff. Tons and tons of rules on different magic items. There are a lot of sections on how to create a campaign. But the great thing with Adventures League is there are dozens and dozens of adventures. So you never actually have to create your own stuff if you don't want to.
And you can also buy books just like these.
Yeah.
That are adventures in their own self.
Yeah. Which is awesome too. So it's good to have the DM's guide if you're going to be a DM. Lots of good stuff in there. But you don't have to utilize all of it. Then you have the Monsters Manual. And this whole book is nothing but monsters.
It's like, and even on the front cover, it's like, behold, we
the
have
beholder.
monsters.
There you go. Nice. And each of them has a little bit about them, how they're organized. Like, you learn a little bit about the mythology of a lot of these monsters and how they're worked into the game. But then the rest of it is just straight stats. So if I want a night hag to attack my party, there's all the stats that I need to know exactly how well it can fight, what kind of spells it can use, what its tactics are to kill the players. Hee hee.
Ha ha ha.
Yep. And there's tons. There's a nice big section on dragons right there. Yeah, dragons.
That's ugly.
Yep.
No wonder you want to hack and slash all these ugly monsters.
There you go.
Sea monsters.
Nice. Ah.
And there's another book about monsters.
Yep. This is called Volo's Guide to Monsters. And this is actually not the regular cover. Because I'm involved in the Adventures League, our store got several copies of the special edition. So I was able to buy that, which was awesome. Volo's Guide to Monsters is more monsters to add to the Monsters Manual. But it also has a section right in the middle on nice special glossy paper where it takes a lot of these monster races and turns them into races that you can play.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Not the whole book. There's like a little bit more than 8 or 10 or something.
Yep. And then they also have a small section that takes a lot of very common monsters that you usually fight, like goblins or kobolds, and turns them into playable races as well. So if you've been fighting goblins forever and you're like, what would it be like to actually play a goblin? Now you can, which is cool. And then just a ton more monsters to add to your adventures. All crazy, weird, awesome, cool stuff. And actually, Volo's Guide to Monsters takes a lot of common monsters like goblins and kobolds and expands on them. So instead of just having your typical hyena-like gnoll, you could have 3 or 4 different kinds of gnolls, specialized gnolls. So that when your party goes, oh, look, it's some more gnolls, that's not going to be hard. And then suddenly they do crazy, weird things that they're not expecting, which keeps your campaign fresh. There are a bunch of other books. There is a campaign guide. So there's a realm called Forgotten Realms, and it has maps and big, huge cities that are in a ton of video games. Governments and secret plots, and there's a whole book that just shows you what that's all about. And again, lots of different kind of hardcover books that are actually just full adventures that would take months and months to play and get through. And those are the books of Dungeons and Dragons. If you're interested in checking out what the rules are like before putting down a ton of money to get any of these, you can download, and I'll try to find a link to put in the notes below, to the introductory rules. And it gives you the bare basics of how to play D&D. If you do that and you enjoy it, then you're going to want to get the Player's Handbook. Beyond that, I don't know what you need, but but if you're going to get heavily into DMing, especially if you want to do your own stuff, Monsters Manual and DM's Guide for sure. And Volos is just awesome. Pick that up. Cool races. Playing a Kobold is amazing.
I haven't played my Cobalt yet.
Can't wait to play my Kobold. So that is an introduction to what role-playing games are, and specifically to Dungeons and Dragons, which is probably the most popular RPG out there. Yeah. Our next video, we're going to make you a character.
Yeah.
So, if you want to watch that, that'll be your next one.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Thanks a lot.
We'll see you in the next video.
Laters. Until your group doesn't get together for a while. Then it ends. But then you start a new one. Yeah.
And then it never ends again.
There you go.
Right.
Excellent.